Do you remember the notebook? Not a contacts app, not a synced account, a real notebook. Like maybe it had a bent spiral binding. Maybe a cover was worn down from being shoved into backpacks for years. Inside, were names and phone numbers written in your own uneven handwriting. 7 digits, sometimes a little note beside them. Jason, skate park, or Sarah, school bus. That notebook wasn't just a list. It was, your entire social network. If you lost it, those people were gone. Not temporarily, gone for good. If someone moved before you wrote their number down, they didn't just disappear from your street, they disappeared from your life completely. And if you were born somewhere between the late 70s and mid 80s, you grew up in the final chapter of human history where this kind of disappearance was, normal, quiet, ordinary, almost expected. Many of you might have shared memories that surfaced unexpectedly. On finding an old piece of clothing from childhood and suddenly being overwhelmed by a rush of memories. Or by remembering the faces of people you haven't seen in 30 years. Faces that still feel, strangely vivid. But beneath those memories, there is another pattern. Something harder to name. A kind of low, quiet sadness that doesn't seem attached to any single event. Not a tragedy, not a breakup, just, absence. That's what today is about. The people who slowly disappeared from your life. Not because of conflict, not because of anything dramatic, just, because the world is analog. Think back to those long afternoons when you'd ride your bike or skateboard to a corner store or gas station just to see who was there. No texting first, no checking someone's location, no group chat. You just, showed up. And whoever happened to be there became your world for the next few hours. There's actually a psychological term that describes the kind of connection that formed in those moments. It's called situational intimacy. These were relationships created entirely by shared place and time. And in the 90s, those moments had something we rarely experience anymore. They were completely unrecorded. There were no cameras in your pocket, no social media posts, no digital timeline. The conversation you had on a street corner in 1994 exists in exactly one place now: memory. Only the people who were there know what happened. And strangely, that made it, more real, because those moments belonged to you. No algorithm was sorting them, no platform was archiving them. Your experiences, they weren't data. They were yours. Think about what it meant to talk to someone on a landline phone for hours. You were literally tethered to the wall by a curly cord. You sat on the floor or leaned against your bed while the rest of the house went quiet. That conversation didn't exist anywhere except, inside your mind. Your memory of that person isn't a profile picture. It's sensory. The sound of their voice, the quiet hum of the house at night, the pauses between sentences. And when that person moved away, something unusual happened psychologically. You didn't just lose a friend, you became the only person carrying that shared history. Those memories exist in one mind now, yours. That feeling isn't just nostalgia. In psychology, it can resemble something called disenfranchised grief, a concept identified by grief researcher Kenneth Doka. It describes a type of loss that society doesn't formally recognize. Losses without rituals. No funeral, no sympathy cards, no one bringing food to your house, just something that quietly disappears. And, you're expected to move on. Losing childhood friends in the pre-internet world often worked exactly like that. Nobody told you it was okay to grieve the kid who moved away in 7th grade. Life just continued. But your brain doesn't always close those emotional loops automatically.
There's another psychological principle called the Zeigarnik Effect. It describes how unfinished experiences tend to stay active in our minds longer than completed ones. In simple terms, your brain struggles to forget stories that never had an ending. That's why you rarely think about friends you said a clear goodbye to. But the ones who vanished without warning, those memories sometimes stay open for decades. For people who grew up in the analog era, there may be dozens of these unfinished friendships, sometimes hundreds. There's another hidden layer to this. Psychologists use the term spontaneous propinquity to describe how friendships naturally form when people encounter each other repeatedly in the same physical places. Not because they planned it, just because they, kept crossing paths. school hallways, arcades, basketball courts, corner stores. You didn't schedule these interactions, you simply existed in the same environment long enough for connection to grow. These weren't always your closest friendships, but they created something important, a sense that your world was, well, populated. You knew the group that always stood outside the pizza place, the kid who worked behind the counter at the convenience store, the people who gathered at the same park every afternoon. They were part of your everyday landscape, social background noise. And when the internet reorganized how we interact, something subtle changed. Most modern interactions are intentional. You send a message, you comment on a post, you plan a meetup. But the casual, repeated collisions that once built friendships happen far less often. In a strange way, technology made communication easier while making spontaneous friendship rarer. And here's the paradox. In the past, people could truly disappear. Now, they almost never do. Your phone might still hold contacts from 15 years ago. Social media occasionally surfaces birthdays from people you haven't spoken to since high school. Your brain ends up living in two emotional worlds at once. It still carries grief for the people who vanished long ago, while constantly being reminded of people who technically still exist in your digital network, but, well, aren't really part of your life anymore. That combination can be strangely exhausting. For a brief moment in the late 2000s, it felt like the internet might solve this. Old classmates started appearing again. A notification would bring back a name you hadn't heard in decades. For a moment, it felt like reopening a door to the past. But something unexpected happened. The person you remembered wasn't the person you found online. Instead of reconnecting with the kid you once knew, you were meeting the curated adult version they'd become, a carefully assembled highlight reel. And the emotional loop your brain had been holding open for 20 years couldn't quite close around that, because the algorithm didn't give you the person, it gave you a performance. And that reveals something important about friendship itself. Real friendships weren't built on constant updates. They were built on time, on friction, on simply sharing the same space again and again. A notification can't replace that. So if an old name sometimes surfaces in your mind, someone you haven't seen since childhood, that reaction isn't a sign that you're stuck in the past. It's evidence of something else. It means you were fully present when those relationships existed. You weren't documenting them. You weren't curating them. You were simply there. And that kind of presence is becoming, well, rare. In a world where many experiences are filtered through cameras and feeds, you still carry memories from a time when life unfolded without an audience. Those unfinished friendships aren't mistakes in your story. They're proof that something real happened. You shared time, space, ordinary moments. And sometimes life simply moved people in different directions. Nothing went wrong. You just experienced friendship the way humans did for thousands of years, through proximity, through time, through small, unremarkable afternoons that quietly shaped who you became. The weight you feel when remembering those people isn't failure. It's the echo of having been genuinely connected to someone. And that might be one of the most human experiences there is. If this video brought back someone you haven't thought about in years, well, you're not the only one. If you want to explore more of these psychological threads, why certain generations feel out of place in the modern world, or why some memories refuse to fade, stay in the conversation and take a breath. Those memories are still part of you for a reason.